Colonel Patricia Hayes survived a Syrian ambush that killed 8 Marines under her command. When she discovers their deaths were orchestrated by corruption within the Pentagon's highest ranks, she must choose between her decorated career and exposing the truth, even if it means revealing the scars that prove her allegations. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The Pentagon's medal ceremony hall hummed with controlled tension, dress blues filling neat rows of chairs while medals caught the fluorescent light like trapped stars. Colonel Patricia Hayes stood at attention before the podium, her spine ramrod straight despite the haunted look behind her eyes. Secretary of Defense Martinez approached with a small velvet box containing the Navy Cross, its surface gleaming with cold fire. For extraordinary heroism in the face of enemy action, displaying exceptional courage under the most dire circumstances, Martinez began, his voice carrying across the silent room. The words seemed to blur together as Patricia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. In the front row, Admiral Richard Blackwood watched with cold blue eyes, his expression unreadable as stone. Colonel Patricia Hayes, United States Marine Corps. The applause erupted like thunder, but Patricia's eyes found Blackwood's across the room. Something passed between them, a challenge, a recognition of things unspoken. Her hand moved reflexively to her left side, fingers tracing invisible lines beneath her dress uniform. When Martinez asked if she'd like to say a few words, the room fell into expectant silence. "Thank you, Mr. Secretary," Patricia said, stepping to the microphone. Her voice carried the weight of granite and grief. "This medal represents not just one person's actions, but the sacrifice of every Marine who didn't make it home from that mission. The truth about what happened in Syria deserves to be told. All of it." Blackwood's face remained stone, but his knuckles whitened against his knee. Later, in the echoing concrete of the Pentagon parking garage, Patricia walked alone, her dress shoes clicking against the pavement with military precision. Footsteps echoed behind her, but she didn't turn until Admiral Blackwood's voice cut through the shadows. "Congratulations, Colonel. That was quite a speech. Very pointed." His approach was measured, deliberate, even in the dim garage lighting where his medals caught what little illumination filtered through. "I said what needed to be said," Patricia replied, her voice steady. Blackwood stepped closer, his presence filling the space between concrete pillars. "Be very careful about the stories you tell, Patricia. Some truths are more dangerous than lies." "Is that a threat, sir?" Her hand moved again to her side, that unconscious gesture becoming more pronounced. "It's advice. From someone who's seen what happens to careers when people dig too deep into classified operations." He paused, studying her face. "Maybe some things are worth more than careers. Maybe. But not everyone sees it that way." As he turned to leave, Blackwood delivered his final warning. "The review board was unanimous in their recommendation for your medal. Don't make them regret it." Patricia's apartment that night reflected her state of mind, sparse, clean lines, the only decoration a photograph of her Marine unit. 12 faces smiled in desert camouflage, frozen in a moment before everything changed. Still in her dress blues, she sat on the couch with the Navy Cross in its open case on the coffee table, pouring 2 fingers of bourbon. "This should have been yours too, Marcus," she whispered to the photograph, her voice breaking slightly on the name. The memory hit her like a physical blow. 1 year ago, bouncing through the Syrian desert in a Humvee, she had sat across from Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez, her communications sergeant. The team was composed of tough, experienced Marines on what should have been a routine classified reconnaissance mission. "Comms check in T-5, Colonel." "Everything's green," Marcus had said, adjusting his equipment with practiced ease. "Good. Remember, we're ghosts out there. In and out, no contact." Through the reinforced windows, the Syrian landscape had rolled past, ancient and hostile but supposedly under control. Marcus had looked thoughtful then, almost troubled. "You ever wonder who really decides these missions get greenlit?" "Above my pay grade, Rodriguez," she'd replied, but something in his tone had caught her attention. "Yeah, but sometimes I wonder if everyone up the chain is playing the same game, you know? Sometimes the intel feels too clean. Too perfect." Back in her apartment, Patricia's hand trembled slightly as she lifted the bourbon. The scar tissue beneath her uniform pulled tight, a physical reminder of that day when Marcus's intuition had proven devastatingly accurate. Her secure phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, the Blackwood files. "Pier 47. Midnight. Come alone. A friend." She stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. But at midnight, she found herself walking through the fog rolling off the Potomac toward Pier 47. Her civilian clothes were dark against the mist as she moved with tactical awareness, checking angles and exits out of ingrained habit. Captain James Mitchell emerged from the shadows, a figure she recognized from joint operations briefings. Navy intelligence with the cautious bearing of someone who dealt in secrets for a living. "Colonel Hayes," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Captain Mitchell. You're the friend?" When he handed her a thick envelope, she could feel the weight of more than just paper. "I'm someone who knows what really happened in Syria." "And why?" "Admiral Blackwood has been feeding targeting information to defense contractors. They need field data for their weapons systems, so they arrange for field tests." His words hung in the cold air like accusations. Patricia's face hardened as understanding dawned. "You're saying we were bait?" "I'm saying your mission was designed to fail. The coordinates were leaked. The extraction point was compromised. Your team walked into a kill box because someone needed data on how new enemy IED configurations perform against our armor." The envelope felt like it contained the weight of 8 lives. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because 8 Marines died for a profit margin. And because if we don't stop this, more teams are going to die." The memory of that day in Syria came flooding back with crystal clarity. The convoy had moved through a narrow valley, Patricia's Humvee second in line as she studied her tactical display. Everything had looked normal when the radio crackled. "Viper 6, this is Overwatch. All clear on thermals." Marcus had been adjusting his headset when he'd said, "Ma'am, I'm getting some weird chatter on the emergency frequencies." Sounds like the world had exploded. The lead Humvee vanished in a fireball that painted the canyon walls orange and black. Patricia's vehicle flipped, tumbling end over end in a kaleidoscope of sky, sand, and screaming metal. When the motion stopped, she hung upside down, blood running into her hair. Marcus was motionless beside her, his eyes open but seeing nothing. Through the shattered windshield, muzzle flashes announced that the ambush was just beginning. She had unbuckled herself, falling hard onto the roof of the overturned vehicle. Pain shot through her left side. Something was broken, maybe several somethings. But she had crawled toward the rear of the Humvee, dragging Marcus's still form, grabbing his radio and what medical supplies she could reach. The left side of her uniform had been dark with blood. Through the smoke, enemy fighters moved between the burning vehicles while her Marines fought back from whatever cover they could find. They were outnumbered 3-1. This was supposed to have been a low-risk reconnaissance mission. Standing on the pier a year later, Patricia's grip tightened on Mitchell's envelope. The extraction helicopter that never came. The backup that was delayed. The intel that was wrong. All part of the same pattern. Blackwood's been doing this for 2 years. Different missions, different units. Always plausible deniability. Mitchell's breath formed clouds in the cold air. "There's going to be a Senate oversight hearing next month. Defense appropriations. If the right person had the right information. You want me to testify. I want you to tell the truth. The question is whether you're willing to sacrifice your career for it." Patricia looked out over the dark water, remembering the taste of fear and metal in her mouth during those endless hours in the Syrian desert. "My career died in that desert. I just haven't been buried yet." Back in her apartment, she spread the documents across her coffee table. Financial records, communication logs, mission briefs. The pattern was clear and damning. When her phone rang, General Morrison's name on the caller ID made her stomach tighten. "Patricia, we need to talk." "My office, 0800 tomorrow," came his voice, clipped and professional. "Yes, sir." "May I ask what this is about?" "I think you know." The line went dead. She stared at the documents, then picked up a framed photograph from the table, her wedding picture from 5 years ago. David smiled back at her, another casualty of war, lost not to enemy fire but to the slower, grinding warfare fought in hospital waiting rooms and therapy sessions, where PTSD and survivor's guilt proved as deadly as any IED. She set the photo face down and returned to the evidence. The next morning, General Thomas Morrison's office felt like a tribunal. The Marine Corps Commandant sat across from her, his spartanly decorated office reflecting a career of service that had somehow remained untainted by the corruption swirling around them. "Patricia, you're one of our finest officers. Your record is exemplary. Your conduct under fire in Syria was nothing short of heroic," Morrison began, but she could hear the "but" coming from miles away. "Which is why what I'm about to say is particularly difficult. There are allegations that you've been sharing classified information with unauthorized personnel, meeting with individuals who have no security clearance, discussing operational details of classified missions." When Patricia tried to speak, Morrison held up a hand. "Let me be clear. Your service record, your Medal of Honor, your reputation, all of that can disappear if you continue down this path. And if I don't continue down this path? If I just let it go? Then you continue to serve with distinction. Promotion to full colonel is virtually guaranteed. Command of your own regiment. Maybe even a star someday. Morrison leaned forward, his expression almost paternal. Or you can chase ghosts and conspiracy theories and find yourself facing a court-martial for mishandling classified information. Patricia was quiet for a long moment, thinking of Marcus, of Jenkins, of all the faces that would never grow old. Sir, with respect, what if the conspiracy theories are true? Then that's a matter for the proper authorities to investigate through proper channels. And if the proper authorities are part of the problem? Morrison's expression hardened. Colonel Hayes, you are walking very close to the line of insubordination. Patricia came to attention. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. 8 Marines died in Syria because someone in our chain of command sold them out. If we don't hold the people responsible accountable, we're complicit in their deaths. I didn't survive that ambush so I could come home and participate in a cover-up. She reached up and began unbuttoning her dress uniform jacket. You want to know why I won't let this go? She pulled her shirt up, revealing her left side. The scars were extensive, surgical scars from multiple operations, but also the rough, puckered marks of shrapnel wounds that would never fully fade. 17 pieces of metal. 3 broken ribs. A punctured lung. 63 stitches. Morrison looked away, but she continued, her voice steady and implacable. I carry these every day. But the Marines who didn't make it home? They don't get to carry anything. So I carry their memory. And their right to justice. She lowered her shirt, buttoned her jacket with mechanical precision. I'm testifying before the Senate Committee, General. With or without the Corps' blessing. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, the weight of 30 years of service evident in the lines around his eyes. Then God help you, Patricia. Because I can't. The memory of that final firefight in Syria came back to her as she left Morrison's office. 6 hours of hell, crouched in a shallow depression with Marcus's body beside her. Her medical kit had been empty, her ammunition nearly gone. The surviving Marines had formed a defensive perimeter, but they were barely holding on. Lance Corporal Tommy Wright had crawled over to her position, his left arm in an improvised sling. Colonel Jenkins is hit bad. Internal bleeding. She needs a hospital. She had looked across the battlefield to where Corporal Sarah Jenkins lay motionless behind a boulder, remembering the young woman's fierce determination and ready smile. How many are we down to? Patricia had asked. 4 able-bodied, 3 wounded. And you, ma'am? Ammunition. Maybe 2 magazines between all of us. The enemy had pulled back, regrouping for another assault. Patricia had checked her watch, calculating odds that seemed impossible. Right, I need you to get on Marcus's radio. Try to reach anyone, Air Force, Navy, hell, try the Coast Guard if you have to. Ma'am, Overwatch said. Overwatch left us to die. We're on our own now. A distant sound had cut through the night air, helicopter rotors. Wright had managed to reach Navy SAR out of the Mediterranean 40 minutes out. Tell them we're sitting in a hot LZ. Heavy resistance, Patricia had ordered. She had allowed herself a moment of hope, then seen the muzzle flashes in the distance. The enemy was moving again. 40 minutes. We just have to hold for 40 minutes. When the Navy Seahawk had finally appeared over the ridge line, enemy fire had immediately opened up, tracer rounds lighting the darkness like deadly fireworks. The helicopter had begun its descent despite the fire, door gunners returning fire as Patricia rallied her remaining Marines for one final push. This is it. Covering fire on my mark. The surviving Marines had poured their remaining ammunition toward the enemy positions while Navy corpsmen leaped out with stretchers. The evacuation had taken 4 minutes, the longest 4 minutes of Patricia's life. As the helicopter lifted off, she had looked down at the canyon floor, memorizing every detail. Someone was going to pay for this. Now, standing before the Senate committee, Patricia felt the weight of that promise. The room was packed with media, military officials, and senators. Admiral Blackwood sat in the gallery, his expression unreadable, but she could feel his eyes on her like a physical presence. Senator Elizabeth Torres, the committee chair, leaned into her microphone. Colonel Hayes, you've made some very serious allegations regarding the planning and execution of classified military operations. Before we proceed, I want to make sure you understand the gravity of your testimony here today. I understand completely, Senator. Very well. In your own words, please tell this committee what happened during Operation Desert Ghost. Patricia took a breath, glanced at Blackwood, then looked directly at the camera. Operation Desert Ghost was supposed to be a routine reconnaissance mission. 12 Marines in and out, minimal risk. What it actually was a deliberately compromised operation designed to test enemy capabilities while providing field data to defense contractors. Murmurs rippled through the gallery like wind through wheat. 8 Marines died because someone in our chain of command leaked our position, our routes, and our extraction points to hostile forces. When Senator Torres asked for evidence, Patricia produced her thick folder. Communication logs showing intelligence briefings that preceded each compromised operation. Financial records linking defense contractors to military decision-makers. And a pattern of similar incidents involving units under the command of Admiral Richard Blackwood. Colonel, you realize that by making these statements under oath, you're essentially accusing a decorated flag officer of treason. Patricia's response cut through the room like a blade. I'm accusing him of murder, Senator. Treason is just the legal term. The room erupted in chaos. When Senator Torres gavelled for order and asked if Patricia was prepared to stake her career, reputation, and freedom on these allegations, Patricia stood. Slowly, deliberately, she unbuttoned her dress jacket and lifted her shirt, revealing the extensive scarring on her left side. The room fell completely silent. Senator, I already gave my career, my reputation, and almost my life for the truth. 8 Marines gave everything. If it takes my freedom to get them justice, that's a price I'm willing to pay. She lowered her shirt, rebuttoned her jacket with steady hands. But the question this committee should be asking isn't what I'm willing to sacrifice. It's what we're willing to accept. Are we going to be a military that protects its people, or are we going to be a military that sacrifices its people for profit? Patricia looked directly at Admiral Blackwood. Because right now we're the latter. And that has to change. The investigation that followed moved with surprising speed. Financial records revealed payments from Blackwater Defense Systems to Admiral Blackwood's personal accounts totaling over $2 million, payments that coincided perfectly with the timing of compromised operations under his command. Communication logs showed Blackwood requesting specific targeting data from missions that resulted in American casualties, data that was then provided to Blackwater for their weapons development programs. Captain Mitchell found Patricia in her apartment that night after Blackwood's arrest was announced. You did it? They're calling it the biggest corruption scandal in Navy history. The Pentagon is announcing a complete review of all classified operations from the last 3 years. New oversight protocols. Independent monitoring of intelligence distribution. Patricia sat surrounded by the documents that had consumed her life for months, the unopened bottle of bourbon still on the counter. Good, she said simply. Patricia, you know this is a victory, right? You got justice for your Marines. She picked up the photograph of her unit, 12 faces smiling in desert camouflage. Did I? Marcus is still dead. Jenkins is still dead. They're all still dead. Mitchell sat across from her, understanding the weight she carried. But the next Marines won't be. The next unit won't get sold out. That's what this was about. You know what the hardest part is? They trusted me to bring them home. All of them. And I failed. You didn't fail. You were betrayed. There's a difference. Patricia traced the faces in the photograph with her finger. I keep thinking about that last radio call. When Overwatch told us extraction wasn't possible. Marcus looked at me and said, "They're not coming, are they, Colonel?" And I told him they were. I lied to him as he was dying. You gave him hope. Sometimes that's all a commander can do. When Mitchell asked what would happen to her now, he was honest about the costs. Your career in the Marines is probably over. The brass doesn't like whistleblowers even when they're right. Especially when they're right. So what do? You find a new way to serve. Write a book. Teach at the War College. Make sure this never happens again. After Mitchell left, Patricia opened the bourbon and poured a small glass. She raised it toward the photograph of her Marines. Semper Fi, Marines. Semper Fi. 1 month later, Patricia stood in Arlington National Cemetery before a section of white headstones, carrying a small bouquet of flowers. One by one she placed a single flower on 8 graves. The last headstone read, St. Marcus Rodriguez, USMC. Faithful unto death. It's done, Marcus. Blackwood's going to prison. They're changing the whole system. Your death meant something. She paused, then added quietly, I wish it hadn't had to. General Morrison approached across the manicured grass. Patricia, I wanted to tell you personally. The Commandant has accepted your resignation. With full honors, full pension, and a commendation for your service to the Corps. They stood together looking at the graves, Two soldiers who had served with honor in an institution that sometimes forgot what honor meant. You know, in 30 years of service, I've never had to make the kind of choice you made. I'm not sure I would have had the courage. You would have, sir. When it mattered, you would have. What will you do now? The War College offered me a position. Teaching ethics and military law. Making sure the next generation of officers understands that some orders shouldn't be followed. Some secrets shouldn't be kept. As Morrison walked away with a final Semper Fi, Patricia turned back to the graves. She touched the scar on her left side, a permanent reminder of the price of truth, of the weight of command, of the cost of speaking when silence would have been easier. I'll see you around, Marines. Keep an eye on the new guys for me. She came to attention, rendered a final salute, then turned and walked away through the rows of white crosses and marble angels. Behind her, the names carved in stone bore witness to sacrifice, to service, and to the eternal truth that some things are worth more than career, comfort, or even life itself. The scars she carried would never fully heal, but they had served their purpose, reminding her that justice, like freedom, requires constant vigilance and occasional sacrifice from those willing to pay its price.